Hey guys, how's it going? It's Danconia here and welcome to the Overwatch League Roundup Stage 2 preview. Okay, so it's time for the start of Stage 2. Stage 2 starts this week, and we've got a whole load of new stuff coming into the Overwatch League for this stage, and we got some things leaving it as well. So it's time to do a preview of what we might see and who we won't see in the Overwatch League Stage 2 2019. So, the first thing to start off with probably is the patch notes for Stage 2 and what we can expect in terms of meta. Maybe, maybe not. So obviously the big one is Baptiste. Hero 30 will be in the Overwatch League. It will be the first time we see Baptiste in competitive play, because Baptiste will not be played in Contenders before he will be played in the Overwatch League, because Contenders is currently on patch 1.32, which is goats. Patch 1.34 is the new patch, and Contenders won't be playing that until their playoffs, which is after the Overwatch League starts. So, patch 1.34, which is what the Overwatch League Stage 2 will be playing on, introduces Baptiste, but the biggest thing is that it introduces a lot of buffs and a lot of nerfs, which mainly affect goats. So, Baptiste is widely expected to not be meta changing, simply because Baptiste, if anything, complements goats more than he does actually combat it. Don't flip out quite yet, just bear with me. The biggest thing I think in these changes is Lucio. The reason for this is his crossfade, so his speed boost effect, is lowered from 30% to 20%. So, in fact, your ball of goats, your meat, your thing that runs at people, made up of your Zarya, your Reinhardt, your D.Va, your Zen, everyone, basically, your Brig, that'll be 10% slower than it was in Stage 1. That offers the opportunity for it to be countered much more effectively. It's much more vulnerable to splash damage. It's much more vulnerable to incoming damage, obviously, when the goats comp is trying to get in. And because goats relies on a group being bunched up, it's especially vulnerable to certain heroes, two of which have been buffed. That is Junkrat and Pharah. So Pharah now does slightly more splash damage than she did. Junkrat, his frag launcher, his impact damage has been buffed from 40 to 50, and his Riptire cost has been increased. Well, that doesn't really matter. Riptire's Riptire. But his frag launcher damage is much more. This means that if you play a Junkrat, or if you play a McCree, because McCree's fan the hammer damage has been reduced, but his dead eye damage is insanely buffed once it's been locked on with the targets for longer. McCree's doing more damage, Junkrat's doing more damage, Pharah's doing more damage, Soldier's doing more damage. All of these heroes are doing more damage as this goat's ball is coming in, and whereas you see in Stage 1, where a lot of these heroes go low, they spend time in a little room, recuperate, wait for Lucio's speed boost, go out again. In that time getting to that room, instead of going very low, they end up dying. That's what this change means. So it really hampers the ability for the GOATS comp to get into the positions it needs to make a difference. That's the main thing about this patch. So it becomes more map specific, right? I would expect to see less goats on Numbani. I would expect to see less goats on... ooh, Rialto, maybe? Apart from last point. Any maps with more open spaces, definitely, and that's something we'll move on to in a minute, Junkertown. I don't think we will see any goats on Junkertown. I'd be very, very surprised. I don't think we would have seen it much this stage anyway, to be quite honest with you. It's just too many sightlines on Junkertown, especially first point. But yes, this does make a difference. Don't expect goats to be gone. Crab. Because it's not. I don't think goats will be gone for a while yet. Especially as teams have to adapt. I haven't seen any scrims, but they will. We've been in goats for months now, since the end of the Overwatch League's inaugural season. So there's going to be an adaptation time to a new meta. So you will see a lot of teams, especially teams that are really heavily invested in goats. I'm talking about Paris and Vancouver, people like that, who can't easily adjust. People who will adjust quicker. London, Philadelphia Fusion, New York Excelsior. Who else? Florida, maybe? I'd expect them to adapt quicker. Because they are not favourable to goats. They like to play their DPS. Whereas Vancouver especially come to mind. They have been playing goats very successfully for ages now, going back into contenders. So I wouldn't expect them to want to budge too quickly. It's going to take time for Vancouver to adjust, I would have thought. Or they might surprise us all and literally be that dominant on everything. But I don't think so. So let's look at our map pool, I think is the best thing to do as well. So the map pool is interesting. We looked at this at the end of Stage 1. And the control will be Lijiang Tower, Oasis and Busan. The maps will go in this order as well in terms of type. So Lijiang Tower should be really interesting. That could be favourable to goats, especially on Control Center. Oasis, again, mostly favourable to goats, apart from Oasis City Center, is it? I forget which one it's called. But that's normally more Farah friendly, so that could be quite good. Busan, we already know about Busan. Oasis, though, is a big hoodoo for London Spitfire, so I think they're probably glad that that is the first map. Although it will go to Control on a tiebreaker, and if you watched last season, London were terrible on Oasis on tiebreakers. Assault would be next, and we get to see Temple of Anubis again, which is always good because Temple of Anubis games are normally very good. We get to see the return of Hanamura, which is normally very good anyway. We've seen some really insane games on Hanamura. And we get to the debut of Paris as a new map for the Overwatch League. Obviously, Paris only relatively new to the Overwatch map pool. I have no idea what we'll see on Paris. It's a rollable map. We've seen people roll maps on Paris. I've also seen it that it can be quite difficult to attack. With the way Paris is set out, I could see it being similar to Temple of Anubis. Especially first point. Very similar to Temple of Anubis. Next up will be Hybrid. We get the return of King's Row, which I'm sure everyone's very glad about. But also we will see Iconwald, which is an interesting map. Again, you like to see Farah on Iconwald. And Blizzard World. Now Blizzard World is obviously relatively new. That can throw some curveballs in terms of results, so Blizzard World should be an interesting one. And the last map, or map 4 I should say, would be Escort. We get to see the Rialto come back from Stage 1. We also introduce Watchpoint Gibraltar, which can be another DPS friendly map. And we also get to see, obviously, Junkertown, which, to be quite honest, we might see Baptiste on. Pirate Ship Baptiste on Junkertown, I could see it. I could honestly see it, and then Tiebreaker will be one of the control maps, not already played. It's a really interesting map pool. I think this is going to be a really interesting stage to see how people adjust from goats if goats is not completely dominant, which I don't expect it to be. And especially on these maps, there are some maps which will throw some curveballs to goats anyway. So it's interesting. It's interesting. Things to mainly say is don't expect goats to be completely gone, because it probably won't. Unless the pros have really found a blindingly big meta when they've been scrimming in this past week and everyone's playing with it. I doubt that somehow, but there will be an adjustment time. Just be aware of that. And also don't expect Baptiste to be played all the time, because he won't be. I don't think Baptiste will be played all that much, to be quite honest with you. especially at the Overwatch League level of things. I think he's a more, in my opinion, and I don't know whether I'm right in saying this, but I think Baptiste is more competitive ladder friendly rather than actual pro play friendly. Again, it depends on your meta. And also with Junkrat being buffed, good news for Houston Outlaws. I'm sure Houston will be very pleased about those buffs. There have been a few transfers during Stage 1 and after Stage 1. We will go through that now. During Stage 1, Seoul Dynasty did take on 2 players. This is Illicit and Highly. Illicit comes from Blossom in Korea. He's DPS, and Highly is a support also from Korea. They've never been like big players, but I don't think they're going to be playing all the time for Seoul, to be quite honest. I think they're just backup players, but I think that does take Seoul up to 12 players, interestingly enough. Very, very interesting from Seoul, good movements, and good backups. Apply, who was a DPS for the Mayhem Academy, and Florida, who was two-way, is now just playing for Florida, so he's no longer two-way. He won't play in contenders. He is only an Overwatch League player. So congratulations for him for his promotion. And we saw, obviously, the assistant team manager and the head coach of Valiant's leave, Moon and Korean Mulan. They have both gone. Obviously, Valiant had a very bad Stage 1. We kind of expected moves to be made. Guangzhou have moved 3 players to 2-way contracts. That's Nero, Rise and Only Wish, so they can play for Guangzhou's academy in China. Oh boy, Washington Justice have made a signing. Guess who from? Yes, Arc of the NYXL is now part of the Washington Justice. At this point, Washington Justice is becoming a team where NYXL dump the players they don't need. Or don't want. Sorry, Arc. Kind of true though, right? At least you can't be as bad as Janus. Right. T-Bubbles, who was a facilities manager for Toronto Defiant, is now team manager and translator at the LA Valiant. And the big one is obviously we've lost Defran. I talked about this in a previous video. Defran is now a streamer for the Atlanta Reign. He will no longer play on Atlanta Reign's team. It's sad because we only really got to see Defran on Zarya and a spicing of Torb, but I really wanted to see him in a full-blown DPS meta, but we're not going to see that. It's unfortunate, but I'm glad we got to see Defran at a pro level, and I'm glad he went out on a high, because he certainly did, even though they didn't win Stage 1. Last, but not at all least, the British have another presence in the Overwatch League, or at least in America anyway. Funny Astro is now part of the Atlanta Reign's organization. He's a 2-way contract with the Atlanta Reign Academy and Atlanta Reign themselves. If you don't know a Funny Astro from the Overwatch World Cup squad for Great Britain, if you don't know him from streaming, if you don't know him from Reddit, Funny Astro is one of the best Lucios in the world. He, I think at one point, had 5 accounts in top 10 ladder in Europe, including number 1 and 2, I think. He is crazy. He's main support. He plays a lot of... he plays Lucio. I mean, he's famous for Lucio. He is possibly the best Lucio in the world. Possibly. Arguably. We'd have to see him in the Overwatch League to be that. But Funny Astro has always been around the competitive scene. He has a lot of experience. Obviously, he did very well for the Overwatch World Cup squad for Great Britain. And he was part of British Hurricane, which is London Spitfire's academy, at the one point when they won Contenders EU, which was a year ago. And they're coming back, old British Hurricane. Believe me, they're coming back. Anyway, that is your Stage 2, outlined right there. There will be another Stage 2 preview where we preview Week 1 of Stage 2. It looks really interesting. Stage 2 will kick off with a blockbuster match between Philadelphia Fusion and New York Excelsior. We also get to see London Spitfire in action twice in the first week. Seoul will play Gladiators, which is really interesting. Shanghai play New York Excelsior, which could be tasty, especially depending on what meta we see. Don't know what Shanghai will be like in this better. I don't know what Shanghai will be like at all, to be quite honest. But we get, say, Vancouver take on Hangzhou. There are a lot of games. But another highlight for Stage 2 is the fact that for the first time ever, a regular week's fixtures will go away from the LA arena. Go away from the Overwatch League arena. The Ultimate Weekend, which will be Stage 2 Week 4, will be held in Dallas at the Allen Event Center in North Texas. That week will be shorter. It will only have 8 matches like the last week of Stage 1 did. And there'll only be select teams. So that week we will see Paris Eternal versus London, Hangzhou versus Chengdu, Houston versus Seoul, LA Valiant versus Dallas, Hangzhou versus Paris, Chengdu versus London, Seoul versus LA Valiant, and Houston versus Texas. We get the good old Texas derby. I think it's only fitting, considering where it is. So the first time the Overwatch League will go on tour, I suppose you could say, it will be going to Dallas. And this will happen every stage from now on. In Stage 3, it will go to Atlanta. And at Stage 4, it will go to LA. Okay. I mean, it's technically LA Valiant's home, but whatever. It's going on tour from LA to LA. Whatever. But obviously next year we will see a lot more of that, because they won't be taking place at the Blizzard Arena. Stage 2 should be interesting. In terms of meta, I really don't know. We will not be seeing the last of GOATs, that's for sure. Ranked is an absolute mess. There's no meta in Ranked. The thing I've seen most prominently is Hammond / Wrecking Ball, and 3 DPS with a Lucio Zen, I believe, depending on what DPS you're playing. Again, I don't know. It's very difficult to say until we see it in pro play, and we've seen literally no pro play on this patch right now. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting, and it's going to be a learning curve for all of us. And I can't wait to see what these teams pull out, especially the real curveball teams like Chengdu, Guangzhou. They'll pull some really wacky stuff if it's available. But for now, thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you liked it, give it a like, subscribe if you're new, and I will see you in the next video. See you then.